My name is Hannah Jane Pritchett, current U of A GIST Master's student. Welcome to the University of Arizona GIST podcast. Our host is Chris Leveille with special co-host Shea Lemar. Today, our topic focuses on how students can take their skills from the classroom to the workforce. We welcome back Markcristiano, Jenna Leveille, Steve Whitney, and Jean Trobia. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Chris Leveille, the Director of GIST Programs at the University of Arizona, and welcome to the UA GIST podcast. And with me today, my special co-host, Shea Lemar from ASU. This is an all-state podcast. Welcome, Shea.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Shea Lemar. I am the Director of GRS at ASU. I also teach in their MAS GIS program, and I am the Vice Chair of the AGIC Council. Mark, why don't we pass it to you?
Hi, my name is Markcristiano. I'm the GIS coordinator for the Kaibab National Forest. Some of my other hats are I'm the Forest Service rep to the AGIC Council, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the LIDAR work group.
Steve, why don't we pass it to you now?
Hi, I'm Steve Whitney. I am a GIS manager at Pima County. I am also the current chair of the AGIC Council.
Jenna?
Hi, I'm Jenna Leavitt. I'm the Deputy State Cartographer for Arizona. I work at Arizona State Lands. I'm also the AGIC mascot, I guess, for those of you that know me. I'm co-chair on several committees, but one of them is LIDAR with Mark.
And Jean.
Hi, I'm Jean Trobia. I used to be the state cartographer, and before that I was a GIS manager at Pima County, and currently I'm the past president of AGIC, and I still am involved with NISGIC as the co-chair of the Transportation or Address and Transportation Committee.
So the last time we assembled this group of GIS leaders from across the state of Arizona, we had a wonderful discussion about what leadership is in GIS, and we had so much fun that we thought we'd continue that discussion, but kind of switch a little bit to talking about, like what to expect in your career in GIS when you get out of higher education. What do people like us look for? Well, definitely not me because I'm in academia, but what do these professional GIS people look for when they're looking for new people to hire, and sort of like what to expect when you enter the job market? So thank you all for joining us today. And I thought maybe I'd start with you, Mark, and ask, what should you expect when you graduate from college and you get your first GIS job? You're thrilled, and then you show up at the door. Mark goes, "Hey, great to have you on board. Now do this." And hopefully they show up on time. That would be my first hope. But what kind of things would you might expect if you're working in the national parks with you, Mark?
Well, first off, it's the federal government, so paperwork. It's usually the first thing we hit people with. After that, and I think this probably applies to a lot of new entry-level jobs, is you might need to unlearn how you did GIS. I think that's one of the big things I see in a lot of our interns. They show up and they expect GIS to be on their desktop, and they want like the data, and I have to sit there and explain, well, we run a Citrix system. There's a corporate data system that you need to connect to when you get your account passwords. And so I've found that both in the national parks and the U.S. Forest Service and sort of anywhere, you have to learn how your organization does GIS. And that may be very different from what you learned at academia, where maybe you were handed a data download to do analysis on. So I think that's the first part that I have to sort of teach people or get them to unlearn how they did GIS and now understand how our organization does it. The second thing that I found with interns is when they're in academia, they learn all these amazing skills and they want to show you all this cool analysis they can do. but oftentimes I'm looking for my interns to do grunt work. Sometimes that's digitizing, sometimes that's basic cartography, sometimes it's just data entry, and it can be boring. And that's kind of where a lot of entry levels start, is by learning sort of the basic skill sets and going from there. So, I do say, I know I, as a supervisor, also try to make sure that my interns or my new people have one really fun project they get to work on, so that they don't get stuck forever doing bad stuff. I had a boss once tell me, your job is divided into thirds. 1/3 you should love, 1/3 is okay, and 1/3 you should hate. The one you hate is the paperwork and the way we do things in the federal government. The grunt work should be reasonably fun, and then you should have that one project that you're really excited about.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. Steve, Jenna, or Jean, do any of you have similar experiences or different experiences on your new hires, the ones you typically pull right out from either an undergrad or a grad program? Steve, anything different or?
Not so much different. I mean, it's lots the same. I think, as Mark alluded to, students get to do a lot of cool stuff as part of their education. But when you get out into the real world and start your first job in GIS, you're usually going to be dealing with data. And, I think that's important. We always used to say that everybody that's, starts out in GIS should be digitizing maps off a digitizing tablet. Now that those aren't around anymore, we can't say that so much. But it's really about really understanding the organization's data, how they use it, how it's created, how it's maintained, because that's a lot of starting positions. You're going to be creating data, maintaining data, because that's where it all starts, is with the data. You can't do the analysis, you can't make the maps, you can't develop the applications without the data. So, beginning people either at the technician or the analyst level, all of our technicians and analysts, they're very data-centric functions that they do. And, to me, it's all about the data. You've heard me say that before. And I think that's important for anybody new coming into an organization.
So, Jenna or Jean, does that mean, why am I getting a higher level education if I'm just going to be digitizing when I graduate? Those other things I'm learning, are they a waste of my time when I'm getting my undergrad or higher level degree? Jenna?
No, absolutely not. I think, we all have to learn the ropes, right? And Tedium is part of that. But I think beyond building character by, having to live through the Tedium, the higher level thinking teaches you how to be critical in your thought processes. It teaches you how to evaluate your own work and how you're doing that. It teaches you how to look for opportunities in your organization to do things better and to be more efficient, to help your team, to be a part of your organization. So those skills, that some of them are soft skills, some of them are personal interactions and how do you get along with people. Some of it is, how do you promote yourself? How do you articulate the importance of the work you are doing, not that the work is tedious. It doesn't make it less valuable. I think one of the things to keep in mind as we all begin anything is that, and Steve mentioned it, it's all about the data, right? Without the foundation of data that we all work with, without that, we could not do what we do. So it's almost more important that you get those basics to be able and do well at all of those basics, so that you can start the bigger picture thinking and utilize the critical skills that you've developed in higher education and how to relate to people and how to build relationships, that side of things. It's a whole package, but you do it in steps, right? So yeah, I think it's very valuable.
Thank you. And an extra thank you, because if you had answered incorrectly as part of the MAS-GIS program and Chris as part of MS-GIS, that would have been unpleasant. Jean, so Mark started this by talking about when he brings interns into the program. How do you feel? You've been working with GIS for a while. How do you feel about internships in the field of GIS?
So I think internships are the way into GIS and a really good start. I just want to touch on what Jenna said because I couldn't agree with her more. And while I was state cartographer, Jenna was a liaison between the state and local government for data. And we were doing a really big project at the time on assessing the value of state lands for solar development. And I can't tell you how much I depended on Jenna in the job that she had at that time because she was the data person. And the more we got into the project, the more I depended on that data. And more than that, the more Jenna started really coming online with, well, now I understand what this data is. I really do that. But now I'm understanding how it's being used in the project. And that was a real developmental thing that I saw happen, and it was really fun to watch. As far as internships, I started as the first intern at Alris. And my first job there was digitizing every section corner for the state of Arizona. And that got me a job in the state of Utah, where I did GIS training. But my first job, right on top of digitizing section corners, was digitizing every abandoned mine location in the state of Utah. What it did was make me very familiar with that data. And when we started going for federal grants to cap unsafe mines, et cetera, going back to what Jenna said, just having that knowledge of the data in the first place and really understanding it isn't just data, it's what format do you put it into, what's the database behind it, and how can you link to that data. That starts building connections. And going back to what Mark said, you really need to learn the corporate structure that you're in, whether it's government or private sector, for how they do business and build on that. And it's just like a bunch of building blocks occurring over time, and you just keep building more and more until you start really seeing the project and project management. But that's probably another topic.
Internships is a great subject to start with for us here as well. In higher ed, both in the MAS GIS at ASU, where internships required for the degree, and UA's GIST masters, where we don't require it, but it's strongly encouraged. Both ASU and U of A do night programs specifically so students can get out and get internships and build the skills. And I say it, I live by it, that it's just as important what you do outside of the class as what you do in it, because you can't go out with an empty resume and a degree next to your name. Sort of another academic note, the federal government actually, a few years back, put in what were called professional master's degrees. And some GIS programs around the country followed that lead, which requires an internship to get a PGIST or a PGIS. And that's actually what Northern Arizona followed with their master's degree as well. There's a little bit of politics of why some universities don't do it and some do. We didn't do it or require the professional masters at U of A because of more of a philosophy I have that I don't think students should have to pay for their internship. And that other places don't do it because what if you're already working full-time in the field? You know, what happens to those students? So there's a little bit, you know, it's one of those great in theory, but not always great in practice kinds of things. But I thought it might be fun to ask each of you maybe, like, what was your first internship or what was your first experience of GIS that helped you, you know, launch your career? Maybe we could start with you, Steve.
So I actually started as an intern out of college at Pima County. As Gene mentioned, he was the GIS manager at the time. And GIS was very new to the mainstream, so to speak, back in 1988. So it started with digitizing subdivision boundaries and parcel boundaries off of recorded plat maps. And it was, I'm a self-prescribed data geek, so I really loved it. I mean, one of my goals was to become the best digitizer in GIS in the world. Not even knowing what else was coming or what else you could do with it at that time. It's a little different these days, a little bit, but because GIS is so mature and touches so many different professions and themes and stuff. But yeah, I started as an intern out of college, and I'm still here.
How about you, Mark? Did you have an internship experience starting out?
Yeah, sort of. So prior to graduate school, I was a surveyor, and then I went to the University of Rhode Island, where I got a master's in environmental science and management, with concentration in remote sensing and spatial analysis. But the point is, I went to URI, and they had a lot of close ties to various organizations, and one of them is called NUIC, which is the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, and that was a division of the Navy. It's a place called the Seabees, which are basically like engineers that go out and build combat things. They had an environmental division that had a little GIS group, and I did a summer internship with them, basically just helping them get their databases together, doing some grunt work, digitizing maps, georeferencing stuff, and just trying to make some maps. And that was cool because I got to work on a military base and have like security clearance, and I thought that was really cool back then. What was kind of interesting is the big takeaway was that I realized that while I liked sort of government, I did not want to work for the military. So that's sort of how I eventually, when I graduated, I had a couple paths to pick from, and one of them could have been like the National Geospatial Agency, which is sort of the military GIS side, or like national parks and U.S. Forest Service path. And that was something, eventually you might hit the ethical question of what do you want to do with your GIS skills. And my internship taught me that I did not want to work for a military operation. I wanted to be more public lands, public service kind of thing. So I think that's one of the advantages of internships is you may learn what you don't want to do rather than what you do want to do. I'm seeing a lot of head nodding. I'm sure there's some other stories out there of what internships taught you. And so anyways, I realized the military was not the right path for me or my skills. So.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful point, Mark, that you can try on different hats without fully committing, as you would in a job or profession. So it's very nice way to do that and just to kind of feel things out. How about Jenna? Did you have an internship experience starting out?
I did. It was interesting because when I went to school, it wasn't, like as long ago as when Steve was in school, but close. They didn't have a GIS program when I was in school. So I was not familiar with what GIS was at all, no idea. I thought I was in hard sciences, so biology and zoology. I really thought that I wanted to be in conservation. So I got an internship with a place called the Conservation Biology Institute, and it turns out that they did all of their analysis through GIS. And so it was when we still had ArcView 3 something, and a lot of command line. ArcInfo was a big deal. We did not have a GUI interface. ArcMap wasn't even born yet. So they taught me command line mapping of projects. Essentially, my first big project was called the Protected Areas Database. And if any of you look that up now, it has grown way beyond where we started at CBI and is now run by USDA and the federal government by state. When I did it, I had the whole contiguous United States and a lot of maps on napkins I had to figure out how to digitize and get into a database that made sense. So it was a big project, and it gave me a taste of the really technical side of GIS, which I really love. Even though it can be tedious, I still really, really love it. But it also gave me a picture of like the bigger scope of GIS and how it can be applied. Because I got really good at command line mapping, Land wanted me. So I ended up at Land as an entry-level analyst right after that. And I thought I would stay for 2 years or so, and I've been there ever since. So I think, you know, my internship and my experience from my internship taught me that opportunities come in a lot of different ways, and how we get to learn about ourselves and what really drives us and our own passions. It comes in a lot of different ways. So I think it's important to try everything and see where you fit and see what really clicks for you, and be open to opportunity. I think internships really give you that flavor of maybe like what Mark said, what you don't want to do ever again, and what you really love and how you want to go down that path. I didn't think I'd end up in GIS, but here I am. Thank you.
Yeah, I think internships are very important, and students have to realize that a lot of them won't be paid, but it's going to pay you back in the long run. That you need the experience. You need to have. It's not just to get the experience and, like Mark said, to try things out, but it's to begin getting your networks going as well too, and to get your name out there and to show that you can be a working professional, even if it's something that you don't necessarily want to become in the long run. People will remember you, and you need to start building that reputation.
Great. So we've talked about internships and working at different places. And that leads to the next question, which is, and Jean, I'm going to start with you, but I'd like to get everyone's take. We're going to discuss what makes a good GIS working colleague. So let's start with both, or either soft skills or the more traditional hard skills, the specific GIS ones. Jean, what do you look for in a GIS candidate, someone you would want to work with, whether it's someone you're hiring or you're just working on a project with?
Well, thanks. That's a good question. So I just want to touch on this internships thing a little bit more. I've got to say probably 80% of the people that I've hired started as interns. I really think it's valuable in those. I'm glad you said soft skills. A lot of the times, given how tedious some of the entry-level stuff can be, looking to see how people respond to that, ask questions, deal with other people in the office, those are really important. And so, again, Steve is a good example. Steve started out as an intern, and it was very obvious he was exceptional, and he moved right on. What I'm looking for especially was drilled into me a long time ago by somebody who I have a lot of respect for. And they said two things. Look for people who want to make the world a better place and aren't afraid to use technology to do it. And that to me has been really valuable. And the other thing is when I'm looking for people, I want them to have a certain level of technical skills, but what I really want is for them to be open to new ideas and new things, and be very willing to say, I don't know that, or I'm going to learn about it, but I'll get back with you, or I don't know that procedure, or I don't know that software, that code, but I'll get right on top of it and I'll learn. So I like people who really acknowledge what their level, what they do and don't know, and especially that they're very interested to fill in that gap and learn what they don't know. And that really over time has proved to be the biggest thing to me when I'm looking at new entry-level positions or interns, as a key sign that this person has probably got what it takes and doesn't kill their coworkers. That's important.
Definitely important. Mark, so it's obvious that the ability to edit data and the patience to digitize, and I always tell people detail-oriented when it comes to data. Are there other hard or soft skills that if someone wanted to work with you, either as an employee or the soft skills just working with in general that Jean didn't mention that would be valuable?
Well, I guess the only thing I can really talk about is I asked kind of a similar question ahead of our fire program a couple months back, and to get his perspective, he has hired hundreds of firefighters. And I said, what do you look for when you hire someone? And he said, I used to look at skill sets, because in fire, there's very specific skill sets. You can do this or that. And he said, I stopped doing that because the reality is I can train anybody to do anything. There are tons of training courses. It is ultimately, as long as someone has the base requisites, I don't really care what their skill set is. I'm looking for that person that's going to come to the program, commit to it, and be an active team member and fit in our program. And he says, that's what you have to sort of figure out in the interviews. And so in the government system, you get handed a pool of candidates who have already met all of your qualifications, right? And so you now have these 20 people that you now have to sift through. So skill sets, in a weird way, once you're past that first level, are irrelevant. You're looking for that person that's going to come to your program with energy, enthusiasm, who can deal with chaos and can fit in the government world, which is weird. Some interns I've had or people that have worked for me have a lot of frustration. A lot of our paperwork is like doing your taxes over and over again. So you better be prepared to sometimes do things the stupidest way possible. Like, welcome to the federal government. It's how we operate. And so it takes a certain person who can, in the face of that, keep going and be part of your program. So one of my more recent hirings, I had two candidates. One had a resume almost on par with mine, and one was a very entry-level person. I ultimately picked the entry-level person because they were really excited. This was their dream job. It's what they wanted to do. They wanted to be out west at a national forest doing GIS, and this was their passion. And the other person was like, yeah, okay, I guess I could come do this. And so I took enthusiasm because of what Art Gonzalez said. You can teach anybody anything, and GIS changes constantly. So don't worry too much about exactly what skill they have. You can teach them that. You want someone you can work with. So
great. Steve or Jenna, so if you have anything to add specific, different than what they've spoken, that'd be great. I also find myself loving Jean and Mark's answers, but from a practical point of view, enthusiasm, it's that stereotypical, I'm a people person, hire me. I need more than just the people person to get the job. Now, Mark did mention to get through to him, you had to have hit the minimum requirements. So he's looking for something above and beyond. But what are those minimum requirements as well, in addition to the soft skills? Jenna, would you be able to speak for a minute to that?
Sure. I guess I have to echo Mark to some degree. I'll talk about the hard skills and the details that we want. But I want, more than anything, I want a team player. I want somebody who is willing to listen and learn. I think those are important things. They don't have to come to the land department wanting to stay there forever. But I want them present when they're there. As far as basic, like GIS skills, right? I think I think ASU and U of A both do an excellent job of giving foundational skills for an entry-level GIS person. You have to be able to work with data. You have to be able to understand workflow and basic database construction and pieces. You have to be able to see how data relates to each other and be able to tell a story from that relationship. You have to be able to look a little bigger than just what data you're handed. How can this be applied? So those critical thinking skills that we talked about earlier, that's important. Seeing the connections between things that's something that's developed over time with experience and exposure to projects. So I am less concerned about that when I look to a new employee. I want them to be able to do the latest and greatest technological things. So, ArcGIS Online is a big deal right now. And remote sensing is also a big deal. So having some awareness of those tools and being able to, you don't have to know it all. And since it's always evolving, that's not the point. But you need to be able to work within the environment confidently and not be afraid to experiment and learn more things. So I think that's what would be important to me.
Great, thank you. Steve, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. I mean, the critical thinking, I think creative thinking and problem solving. Just, when you hit a roadblock, just don't go running off asking, what the answer could be. Put some thought into it, get creative. I think another good trait is independence, and that kind of goes along with that. Being, take it upon yourself, be an independent worker to the extent that you can. And then just lastly, as we've all heard and been talking about, you are going to be faced with tedious jobs, tedious projects. Look for ways to make them fun. That's, what I look for in hires is, they're not afraid to take on any challenge. And that's definitely one of the questions we ask on many of our interviews is, how do you handle tedious, repetitive tasks? So that's where the creativity comes in. That's where making it fun, regardless of how tedious it is, that definitely helps.
So I appreciate that everybody took some time to join us on the joint U of A ASU special podcast. And hopefully we'll be able to see everybody virtually this year and then maybe back in person next year. And as Steve pointed out, yeah, it's not just AGIC, Shea's got a number of events up there. Maricopa does as well. Mark's got a few going on up in Flagstaff, and Steve and I do down here in Tucson. So please come out and join us and get to know your community. Have some fun. Thank you, guys. We'll be seeing you around the water cooler and the AGIC shops.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you tune in for part 3 next Friday as we continue the conversation with topics on jobs in GIS and tips from these GIS leaders on job interviews and much more.